Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Boys, we're back with another In Context. Today is June 29th. We had a situation 2 weeks now ago where the U.S. allowed Israel to bomb Iran, and then the U.S. followed up with their own bombing. Iran responds. All this, in my opinion, seemed slightly choreographed, but even through this quote-unquote choreographed events, the ceiling was raised. It wasn't a normal choreographed. I think it begs the question, where is this all headed? Where's the Middle East now after these events?
I think that, regarding your comment about this being choreographed events, I believe that the United States actions were choreographed. And there's a lot of evidence to show that both the United States and Iran were in very close communication regarding what each other was going to do, which ended up minimizing casualties. I don't believe the United States killed anybody in Iran, and Iranians didn't kill any Americans. However, I do not think the Israeli action was choreographed. I think the Israeli action was it caught him completely off guard, the opening attack. Misinformation and the fog of war immediately set in after, and all these generals and leaders were proclaimed to be dead. Now we find that some of them are not. We know Shamkhani and Ghani, the head of the IRGC, Quds Force, I believe, is still alive. And Shamkhani was seriously injured, but Ghani looks like he's totally fine. And that leads me to wonder who else might be alive. So, but nonetheless, it's pretty obvious Israel demonstrated a mastery of Iranian intelligence. And, I think the biggest surprise for me and for everybody was how integrated Mossad was in Iran, having entire factories building drones in apartment buildings literally located hundreds of meters away from IRGC buildings in middle of Tehran. And it wasn't just a handful of Mossad agents or people affiliated with Mossad. It looks like it might be hundreds, if not even thousands, of people in Iran who for years now have obviously been planning and preparing this. I saw fake trucks that were created to look like they were carrying wood that actually were carrying drone parts. People were living in Iran that supposedly were, working on work visas and actually were residents of other countries that were working directly from Assad. And it seems like a lot of the damage that was done to Iran actually came from inside Iran, more so than from the Israeli airstrikes, which did cause a significant amount of damage as well. Tehran was pretty seriously bombed and attacked for those 12 days. And the very last day of the war was, from what I heard from my own personal sources, was absolutely the worst, the most dramatic. I think Israel has definitely changed the calculus of how this new game is going to play out. And I think Iran did show that they have capacity to hit back at Israel, but it looks like the overall strategic effect of their targets was less successful. They didn't hit any Israeli generals or military leaders or political leaders or scientists. Most of the things they blew up were, didn't cause as much long-term structural damage. Though that bombing of that Weizmann Center for Scientific Technology Research was a pretty significant hit. Like, other than that, a lot of the stuff seemed to be more cosmetic. Do I think this is the end of the conflict? Definitely not. I think that things are going to probably continue to escalate. More evidence is emerging that the United States did not successfully totally destroy these nuclear reactors. It looks like Iran was clever enough to hide their materials, the nuclear materials and other key components of the program before this attack happened. And I think it just gives Israel more license to act sort of treat Iran like it treats Lebanon. And that is going to be catastrophic for regional security purposes, because at some point, the choreographed, trying to not hit anything too important is going to give way. And, nuclear reactors in Bushehr or in the Dimona one in outside Tel Aviv, or that could be the target, and that could be a real nuclear catastrophe if those are hit. So I think this is a very dangerous game. And that's my opening comment, I guess.
I think the US allowed Israel to attack Iran. I think the Iranians were expecting this. And actually, the US said clearly that we told regional countries and we told Iran. The announced explicitly that they told Turkey, and they had to for bureaucratic reasons, because Turkey is part of the NATO. These planes were flying through airspace very close to Turkey, so they had to inform them. This was just bureaucratic. People quite frequently, when they do analysis, start looking for conspiracies and secret nonsense. Well, while if they just think about the paper trail and bureaucracy, they will find that there are very solid grounds to understand how things work. So Iran saw this coming. The reason it harmed them so much, I think, is because of two things. First, as usual for client states that just want to exist within the colonial order, they think that there are rules. But Israel is the poor cousin of the master of the colonial order, and it can get permission from the master of the colonial order, in this case, the US, to break them. While the client states do not think so. So you don't see it coming. So in this particular case, Israel actually broke a rule, which is explicit Israel-directed open assassinations. Before, they were using the deniability element. So when they assassinated, for example, Ismail Haniyeh, which seems to have been exactly the same way, they did not do it as Israel, but as something unopen. They didn't acknowledge it, use the smirking tactic. In this case, they did not see this coming. Also, they seem to have been planned badly, and that showed up. Israel was clearly after shock and awe demonstration. That's why they went after names, regardless of whether these names were important or not. Some of the names and the so-called scientists they killed are retired. And it's not obvious why would you kill a retired scientist. He's an old guy. Anyway, not doing much. But it's a name, it's a well-known name, it makes a flash. So Israel was after making a show, also after cutting the military strength of Iran. This business of Israel being after the Iranian nuclear program is complete nonsense. It's just a justification so that the Western colonial alliance would come and say, yes, we support them, which is exactly what they did. The business of they were trying to bring down the regime is complete nonsense. It was just meant to increase the shock and awe that we are so powerful. But in truth, if they really ever wanted to or were after regime change, they wouldn't have hit their principal allies, the secular elite in Tehran. So I don't buy that. About the Iranian counter-response, actually, for the first time, Iran was attacking meaning business. So suddenly, they discovered where the Haifa seaport exists. So when Israel actually bombed and killed Nasrallah, Hezbollah did not discover the port of Haifa. They hit the eastern suburbs of Haifa, the southern suburbs of Haifa, beyond Haifa and the northern suburbs of Yafa, but never the port of Haifa. Israel discovered it. Iran discovered it and actually damaged it significantly. Iran also damaged significantly the Israeli Defense Ministry and its installations. That was a target for Hezbollah, and they made some minor damage for it. So what I mean of this is Iran actually pulled a lot of the stops. Not necessarily all of the stops, but a lot of the stops. And the reason they didn't pull all of the stops, because actually there were still rules of the game. For example, Israel didn't attack Bushehr, the reactor in Bushehr. So there were still rules for the game. Now, I think the US allowed them to attack because actually, obviously, they were actually planning it and timing it in collaboration. There is clear evidence of collaboration in timing it. So the US allowed it. Now, it is true that the US shut it down. So the American attack on the Iranian nuclear program, although it claimed that it wanted to obliterate the program, this is nonsense. They know it's nonsense. What it was meant to do was to shut the show because the US decided that, well, this is enough. We have achieved what we wanted. I think what the US wanted was to cut Iran down in size. What Israel wanted is different, and that's where I think things are heading into an unstable situation, like Joseph is saying. So to complete this, The problem right now, U.S. has a problem with its international posture. So Trump says we obliterated the program. His officials and even his sycophants like Lindsey Graham tried to calibrate it by saying, well, we damaged it, but we didn't obliterate it completely, because they don't want to call him a liar, which he is, but they want to maintain the policy objective, which is we need to keep Iran under control in the doghouse. Because if they obliterated it, then what are they negotiating? And actually, the correct message the US government wanted to deliver was, we damaged this program significantly, we set it back, however, it is still going, and we have to keep negotiating to put it under control. So it's amusing that the orange clown is off message. This is very interesting to observe. Now, to back off to the issue of instability. I think the US has opened a can of worms it will regret. So first, Israel wants out of this war to expand its strategic space. It wants to share in colonization of the Middle East. Netanyahu, allied Israeli media, is making noises that Netanyahu is going to be visiting the White House in the second half of July to talk with the US about how they are going to share the spoils of the war. So Israel has serious delusions of grandeur, and it wants to become a colonial power, an independent or at least subcontractor in the Middle East. And it thinks that it has the right to expand its strategic operation sphere to encompass Iran and possibly beyond. And that's why, for example, the Israeli defense minister says that, well, I have ordered my military to maintain ability to control the Iranian airspace and to prevent Iran from controlling its airspace. While Iran is saying we're not Lebanon, we're not allowing that. And the US is talking about negotiations, and I suspect this is going to get really complicated soon. What everybody is missing out of this, all the colonial order is missing, is the Arab Zionists in the process now have been painted into Israel's camp. So their own population now see them as part of the Israeli camp. And that increases anger at them. The colonial order itself is not in good shape. People now don't see Israel as a Palestinian problem, nationalist problem. They see it as their problem, because those guys and their despots are one thing. It's starting to happen. It hasn't arrived yet, but it's starting to happen, because actually this is true. This is functionally true. And Israel has demonstrated this.
Yeah, I think I agree with a lot of what you're saying. I mean, don't get me wrong. Iran did do some damage to some significant damage in Israel this time. There's no denying that. But my point was, comparing what Israel was able to damage in Iran, it's really hard to compare. Like, significantly more military stuff was damaged in Iran than in Israel. But yeah, I think I think local populations are gonna have to soon wake up to the fact that you're right. It's not just a Palestinian problem for the Palestinians anymore, but it's something that really has become a problem for everybody in the region. And I am very interested to see what ends up happening in Syria. All these rumors that are coming out about possible normalization between the new Syrian government and Israel, coming from everybody except the Syrian government, which is it seems like this is a tactic Trump likes to use, where he'll like put words into people's mouths and commit them to things they never agreed to, and then sort of force them to literally say, like, I didn't say that, or go along with it. It's a kind of strong arming. My mom used to do this kind of stuff with me, She's like, you having a good time? You having a good time? Where my option was to say yes or to be quiet. I didn't get to say no. You know what I mean? This is her way of keeping me in line as a kid, so I wouldn't complain. It was like, you're having fun, right? This is great. And it actually really sort of worked. So I don't know, though. I feel like that, I still have a hard time believing Syria will actually normalize with Israel anytime soon. It'd be an incredible betrayal of everything that the revolution stood for. And I think it will definitely fracture support inside the government. It could lead to the whole state's collapse, to be perfectly honest. So I don't think that's going to happen. But there will probably be increasing pressure on Syria to slow walk normalization through quiet yet subtle steps towards it, I guess. But you hear Iranian or Israeli like analysts, and you're getting really, really aggressive in their talking about possibly Pakistan as the next target. And Pakistan's a nuclear armed country, and I guarantee that wouldn't go well if that ended up happening. And they basically make it sound like they can basically operate anywhere they want in the world at any time for whatever reasons they feel necessary. And at some point they're going to cross the wrong red line. That's my guess, because I don't see any temperance or any sense of okay, this is where we will stop and this is our goal. It to me really seems like Israel has a vision of world domination, and I wouldn't even be surprised if one day, if things keep going the way they are, there'd be a direct confrontation with Israel and the United States. If Israel gets that, because I believe in the psyche that that's something they would welcome at the right time. Not now, obviously, but I really think there's no limit to what these guys are capable of trying to do. So it's interesting to see the Arab regimes really showing their weakness throughout this whole process. Really unable to accomplish anything other than being sort of, intermediary ground between missiles flying overhead, and it's a dangerous time. And I don't see Israel's actions with Iran being over. I think you'll start in the next few weeks, even seeing covert attacks, stuff they can plausibly deny, before they get the approval from the U.S. to go at it again for round two in a few months or maybe even a year. That's how I see it. I don't think this is going to end. I think Israel has more plans in mind. I agree that they're not necessarily out for regime change, but they are out to make a point that they are going to be the regional hegemon. And again, with Iran, Ayatollah Khamenei is 86 years old. The guy's not going to live forever. If anybody saw that last interview he did, he was clearly shaken and weak, and he looked like a man who is every bit of 86 years old. Let's put it that way. So, again, what comes after him? Probably military dictatorship, but a more secular, nationalistic kind of military dictatorship that might be more palatable to the West. But that all depends on which people in the military actually assume power. And that also leads to what will there be another supreme leader? What will that person's role be? Obviously, that person, whoever it is, will not be as free to act as Khamenei, who has been there for almost 40 years. So it's going to be a time of great instability. Again, with Trump, I mean, who knows what he's going to do? I really don't think he thought. I really think in his mind, he thought that by doing this, Iran would eventually say, "Okay, you know what? You proved it. We'll make a deal now." He's just not understanding that's not going to happen. And I think these guys are willing to take the whole ship down if necessary to defend what they want to defend. And I don't think the United States has a stomach to put boots on the ground in another country like it did in Iraq. That would absolutely destroy the MAGA coalition, like if that happened. So, a lot of time will tell, but it's definitely probably one of the most dangerous times in the Middle East that I can remember in my lifetime right now.
Regarding Syria, if you look carefully, the leaks are Israeli, and then they are echoed in Arab media and American media. And essentially, it's a wish list from Israel to Uncle Trump, bring Syria in. But it's not attainable because, Israel is not willing to leave the Golan Heights. And if you don't leave the Golan Heights, then nothing doing. So it's not serious. As far as Israel threatening others, right now, they still have a serious struggle with Iran. I don't think the US would allow this to happen again. And as far as looking at the future, we need to actually think and assess, I think, in the next segment, US plans versus Israeli plans for the Middle East. But as far as threatening, the actual threatening actions that Israel is taking are against Turkey, not Pakistan. Pakistan is anyway checked with India, so it's not an issue. But the real friction, for example, in Syria is with Turkey. The problem with Turkey is part of NATO, and NATO needs Turkey to stabilize itself against Russia. So right there, Israel is running into things that its own colonial masters don't like. On a related note, the Arab regimes contributed to the war. The Jordanian Air Force was hunting the Iranian drones on behalf of Israel to bring them down on top of the heads of the population that is damned by them. So it's a pathetic situation. Just a correction. I made an incorrect statement when I said that Israel is now a threat to everyone. Israel has always been a threat to everyone in the Middle East, but is now coming up explicitly and clearly about it, that they want to dominate everyone in sight. So even the nationalists who say we have nothing to do with the Palestinians, they have nowhere to escape. And that actually undermines these client regimes, all of them.
Well, Joseph touched on different parts of the Middle East, and as far as what's the future gonna hold, I want to know your thoughts on that as well.
So I want to make just one detailed comment, then talk strategically. So the detailed comment is the Iranian regime is there for the long haul. So that's why the Expediency Council is now considering the candidates to take over beyond Khamenei. So, and also the regime doesn't have obvious alternatives. So I think the regime is here to stay. The US accepts that. Israel doesn't see that it can do otherwise. So it has to work on the alternative to it, which is, well, we want to dominate them. We can stay in there, but we can dominate them. Strategically speaking, I think what the way the US looks at the Middle East as backyard of its influence, it's under good control. We need to pacify, to put it on the back burner so we can shift our attention to China. So that is the strategic goal of the US in the Middle East. I don't think that is going to happen because right now they have Israel to manage and Israeli ambitions to manage. And that is going to be hard, especially while they also need to stabilize the status of relations with Iran. Iran is not going to give up its nuclear program because, to begin with, the program is a tool to break out of the pariah state. So they're not going to give it up without the US removing the pariah state. But the US is not willing to remove the pariah state because that would mean reworking the whole structure of the Middle East, and they don't want to do that. In addition to the fact that they already cut Iran to size, so they are not about to give it rewards. So I think what the US looks like doing is they think that they can control Israel because in the end they can just shut it down. We think so. Israel thinks otherwise. The negotiations with Iran may end up with papering over things and allowing Iran to continue some sort of low enrichment. That will kick the ball into the weeds. Israel will try to continue to dominate Lebanon and the region. But this, I think, is heading towards a blow up. That is more serious than what we have seen. But I won't expect that in the coming months, maybe, or the coming few years. So we're talking about midterm.
My take, and I think it's slightly different than yours. I think that the United States will allow Israel to do something again in the future at a time that's politically expedient for Trump. I also don't rule out Trump again bombing those same sites at some point in the future when politically expedient. I don't think Trump really knows what he's doing. And I think Trump really thinks that he can do whatever he wants and it'll all work out. I believe there is no rational logic to him other than his own self-preservation. What's going to personally harm him is pretty much the only calculation I think going through his head. So I would not be surprised if the United States got involved again. And I actually would be surprised if Israel didn't. I really think this is not the end. Their guy, what Katz already said, the defense minister said that, you talked about earlier, that they're basically just waiting for the right moment to launch more attacks. It's like the gun is pointed and you're just waiting to pull the trigger. I don't see them not pulling it at some point, which could definitely trigger a massive response from Iran this time. Because you're right, this war was still played within rules. Neither of those major nuclear reactors were hit, right? And Iran could have targeted them. And in my opinion, if it was an existential enough situation where Iran thought, it's now or never, they would have hit it. Which leads me to believe that Iran didn't feel that they were in an existential threat. Because I do believe that there was more they still could have done that they didn't. I don't think they pulled all their tricks out of the bag. And I think Israel definitely didn't pull all of its tricks out of the bag, especially considering it's a nuclear armed power. So as violent and destructive as this 12-day conflict was, there's still much, much more room for escalation on both sides' part. Does Israel ever really end conflicts it's in? That's the question. does Israel ever fully disengage? Like, I don't, they haven't disengaged from Lebanon. They clearly aren't going to be disengaging from Gaza or the West Bank anytime soon. Who knows what they're doing with Egypt, even behind the scenes. I don't see this as okay, it's over, now we can move on. I think Israel, once it gets involved in the conflict, it sort of always lingers around there, waiting to, push the button again. So
They
that's
want
my
more.
take on the future. Even
They
more. Yeah,
always
that's
want
my
more.
take. They always want more. Exactly. There's no, with Trump, at least, with the United States, I really think that the goal was, even if Trump in his head at least was to get rid of the nuclear weapons threat and then we can move on and who cares? That's it. I don't believe Trump wanted regime change. I don't believe the United States wants anything to do with rebuilding a new Iran. I just think the United States wants the nuclear threat removed and then they can go back to being the pariah state that's ignored. But Israel, I think that there's always more they want, and they won't be satisfied until they get it or are thoroughly defeated in trying to get it unsuccessfully. That's how I see it.
Where does Gaza fit into this?
It looks like they are trying to end the slaughter because everybody has had their fill of blood. So right now there is some dance to get Netanyahu out of jail, literally, and in the process also wrap up the slaughter in Gaza. The lines of the agreement seems to be exactly the lines that Harris proposed in January 2024. Not the Rivera on the Middle East nonsense of the Orange Clown, meaning they're going to bring in an Arab alliance to occupy and police Gaza on behalf of Israel, paper over it by the Palestinian Authority, and some sort of an alliance with local forces that are essentially Hamas.
I think we got it.
Joseph?
Anything else, Joseph?
I think that pretty much covers everything.
I agree.
I mean, I think that, what happened with China and the East, that's going to be very interesting to see because I think Steve Bannon himself said it, right? Within the next 10 years, that's the next American major war, not Iran, China. He literally said that. When I first heard that, I was like, whoa. He was dead serious. The next major war, not going to be in the Middle East, it's going to be with China in about 10 years.
The US has been planning to confront China for 25 years now. And every time they sit about doing it, something else happens and distracts them. And China makes use of this of the time to improve its position. So I'm not sure it's going to happen in the next 5 years, but yeah, possible. It's more possible than it was in the last 25 years.
All right, Shabab. Thank you so much.
Assalamu alaikum.
All right. Well, fun. Thank you, guys.